So think about the biggest leaps in human technology. We are talking about steam power, electricity, space travel, artificial intelligence.
Right, the real paradigm shifts.
Exactly. And what do you think they all have in common? I mean, they all follow a very strict, almost punishing rule. It's that idea of 100 years of evolution and 1,000 times of improvement.
Yeah, that endless cycle of trial and error.
Right. We guess, we test, we fail, we iterate. Every piece of tech you own is basically built on a mountain of discarded prototypes. But what if a suite of world-changing technologies bypass that entirely? What if the blueprint didn't come from a sweaty lab, but just arrived, complete?
It's a premise that completely upends how we understand innovation, frankly. Because today, we are looking at a document that claims exactly that. We're doing a deep dive into a fascinating, highly unusual text titled Master's Insight, #353, The Birth of Cosmic Inventions. It is dated December 12, 2025.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to impartially explore the mind-bending claims laid out in this text. I mean, it details a series of radical air purification and life extension technologies attributed to a figure named Leader Fuchiwu.
Yeah.
But the core argument of this text is that these inventions weren't, created through engineering. They were, according to the document, entirely authorized or revealed instantly, just in one shot, to solve what it calls the greatest unseen tragedy of modern civilization.
We really need to look at this document as a unique piece of what it calls a civilizational record.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't written like a standard patent application or a dry, scientific, peer-reviewed paper.
Not at all.
Right. It fundamentally challenges our understanding of how innovation happens, and more importantly, how you and I interact with our built environments every single day.
And the way it describes that interaction is legitimately terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
Imagine buying a state-of-the-art water filter for your kitchen. Right. You spend a fortune on it, but instead of putting it on your tap, you just leave it sitting on the counter, drink the dirty, contaminated water straight from the pipe, and let your kidneys do all the filtering work.
Which is madness.
You would call that completely insane. But the text claims we are doing exactly this with our lungs in modern buildings right now.
Yeah, the text introduces a concept that it calls the humanoid air purifier. And it insists this is not a metaphor. It is not some clever analogy. It is a literal description of humans trapped in sealed buildings.
Wow.
The text argues that the massive air conditioning systems we rely on in these glass and steel structures, they don't actually eliminate toxins. They just act as giant blenders.
Giant blenders.
Exactly. They take the poison, mix it up, and distribute it evenly across every square foot of the space.
So if you are listening to this right now in a sealed office building or an apartment complex, just, look up at the air vent. The text is arguing that the vent isn't protecting you. It's just stirring the pot, and your lungs are doing the heavy lifting.
Right.
But what exactly are we filtering? The text gets incredibly specific about this toxic payload, right?
It does, and the scale of it is what makes the text argument so alarming. It lists PM0.1 and submicron particles, VOC droplets.
Which are volatile organic compounds.
Yeah, exactly. Plus aerosols, heavy metal particulates, microplastics, and pathogen carriers.
Let's pause on PM0.1 for a second because we hear about PM2.5 a lot in pollution warnings. But PM0.1 is a different beast.
A totally different beast.
To put that in perspective for you listening, we aren't talking about visible dust motes floating in a sunbeam. These are ultrafine particles, 1,000 times smaller than a human hair. They are so incredibly small, they don't just go into your lungs, they literally cross the blood-brain barrier.
Which is exactly why the text claims conventional building filters fail. In a closed HVAC system, the text explains, these ultrafine particles become permanently suspended.
Because they're too light.
Right. They don't have enough mass to just fall to the floor where they can be swept up by a vacuum. They are caught in the continuous airflow of the building, just floating, constantly circulating through the ductwork and back into the rooms over and over.
So you basically have heavy metals and microplastics just permanently surfing the air currents in your office.
Exactly.
If the building's air conditioning isn't capturing them and gravity isn't pulling them down, well, where do they go? What is the physical toll of this?
The text's grim conclusion is that because these particles are permanently suspended, the only place they eventually find a resting spot is inside the moist, sticky tissue of the human lung.
Oh, that's so gross.
It is. We act as free, disposable filters for these buildings. The text states that we pay the ultimate price for this service with chronic inflammation, immune system collapse, and eventual organ failure.
Just from breathing at work.
Right. It describes sealed buildings not as feats of modern architecture, but as aging accelerators and toxic prisons. We are taking on a toxic load every 24 hours that far exceeds our biological capacity.
Okay, so millions of people are essentially aging faster, our immune systems are redlining, and the building is just casually using us to clean its air. I mean, if sealed buildings are toxic prisons, there has to be a way to break out.
You'd think so, yes.
Because a water filter sits on a counter, but I can't just unplug my lungs and leave them at home. How do we escape this without abandoning civilization and moving to a cabin in the woods?
So the primary escape mechanism detailed in the document is something called the mobile little paradise.
Mobile little paradise.
Yeah. The text describes it as the world's first surgery-free, side-effect-free, wearable external artificial lung.
Wearable.
Yes. The concept is to allow a person to carry their own perfectly clean microenvironment with them, completely decoupling their breathing from the building's toxic ecosystem.
An external artificial lung. Now, usually when we think of technological innovation, the holy grail is miniaturization.
Oh, always. Smaller is better.
Yeah, you want to make the microchip smaller, the cell phone thinner, the wearable device so tiny you forget it's there. But the text describes leader Fuchi-Wu being deadlocked for months on a massive engineering paradox trying to build this thing. He was fighting a war against physics.
He really was, balancing wind volume, back pressure, maze length, energy consumption, weight, and heat dissipation.
Okay, that is a lot of factors.
Those are brutally complex engineering contradictions. Let's break down why. If you increase the wind volume to get enough breathable air to a human, you need a stronger fan. A stronger fan increases energy consumption, which requires a bigger battery.
Which generates more heat.
Exactly.
Right.
Then, if you lengthen the purification maze inside the device to actually catch those microscopic PM 0.1 particles we talked about, you dramatically increase the back pressure.
Wait, is back pressure kind of like trying to drink a really thick milkshake through a tiny coffee stir?
That is a perfect analogy.
Okay, so the harder you pull, the more the straw collapses, and the harder your lungs, or in this case, the machine's motor, have to work.
Yes. The longer and tighter the filter's maze is, the harder the motor has to work to push the milkshake, the air, through the stirrer, which again spikes the heat, the noise, and the weight.
It just cascades.
It is a vicious, closed loop of problems. Any normal engineering team would spend a decade running simulations just to find an acceptable compromise.
But the text says there was no compromise, no decade of simulations.
No. What's fascinating here is how the deadlock was broken. According to the text, it wasn't solved by a breakthrough in material science or a team of engineers working late. It was solved by a single sentence entering Leader Wu's consciousness.
Just a sentence.
The sentence was simply, make it bigger, let the user wear it on their back.
Wait, make it bigger? I'm struggling with that logic. I mean, if you are already fighting against a device being too heavy and consuming too much power, making the fan and the unit bigger sounds like a terrible idea. How does putting a heavier machine on your back solve a weight and energy contradiction?
It sounds totally counterintuitive, but the text claims that instantly, all the engineering problems vanished because the physics changed. By making the fan larger, it could push a massive volume of air at a much lower rotational speed.
Oh.
And lower speed means drastically less energy consumption and almost zero noise.
Oh, I see. It's like how a giant ceiling fan moving slowly moves way more air quietly than a tiny desk fan screaming at top speed.
Precisely. The air pressure stabilized. Because the unit was bigger, the purification maze could be lengthened to catch the absolute smallest toxins without creating that milkshake straw back pressure.
What about the weight, though?
As for the weight, moving it to a backpack format distributed the mass perfectly across the torso's strongest muscle groups, making it feel lighter than a hand-carried device. And finally, the larger physical surface area of the backpack naturally resolved the heat dissipation without needing extra cooling fans.
That is wild. And the text makes a huge point to emphasize that this wasn't an aha moment. It wasn't some spark of human inspiration while taking a shower. It was a direct instruction. It was literally downloaded into his mind.
Yes, the text is adamant that this is not the result of human effort over 50 years. It describes it as a door of civilization being opened. But a backpack, even a brilliantly engineered one, is ultimately just the delivery system. It still needs a core mechanism to actually trap those deadly toxins, the microplastics, the heavy metals.
Right, because a big backpack is great for walking through a toxic world, but humans are stationary creatures. We sleep for 8 hours a night. A backpack doesn't help me when I'm unconscious in a sealed hotel room. Does the text just abandon us when we take the backpack off? And what is actually doing the filtering?
This brings us to a crucial component the text calls the scapegoat black box.
The scapegoat black box. I have to admit, when I first read the section about the scapegoat organ, I had to read it 3 times.
It's a lot to take in.
It sounds almost like science fiction. It says that originally designing this specific filter was a nightmare. It was too expensive to make, it had a ridiculously short lifespan, and the structure was overly complex. But the text claims Leader Wu literally woke up from a dead sleep with a complete, unprecedented, cosmic-level structure perfectly formed in his mind.
Right. It explicitly states that this mechanism had never been used by humanity before. He woke up, drew the schematics, and it was perfect immediately. The downloaded specs are extraordinary. Extremely low cost, a high lifespan, requires zero maintenance, is modular, and can be mass-produced.
But wait, how does a filter require zero maintenance? Normal filters catch things like a net, and eventually, a net gets full and clogs. How does a cosmic-level structure bypass that?
This raises an important question about its philosophical and mechanical design. It acts as a scapegoat organ. The text suggests it doesn't just passively catch debris, it actively absorbs the environmental damage.
Like it takes a hit for you.
Exactly. Instead of your liver or your lungs taking the hit and suffering cellular degradation from heavy metals, this black box takes the hit. It shifts the burden of environmental toxicity entirely from biological tissue to a mechanical, replaceable component.
It takes the death process so your body doesn't have to. That's wild. But going back to the sleep problem, what about dense, windowless spaces?
Yeah, the truly sealed-off rooms.
Right. Think about basement apartments, hotel rooms, hospital rooms situated deep inside buildings next to operating theaters, or even tiny security booths. These spaces are incredibly dense and often lack any real ventilation to the outside world.
The text highlights a century-old problem in these spaces, which is hypoxia, or oxygen deprivation. When you are in a closed room, CO2 and metabolic waste accumulate rapidly. Even if the air conditioning is running, you are effectively rebreathing the exhaust of your own body. And this halts cellular repair and completely ruins sleep quality.
So what's the downloaded solution for the windowless room? How do you get fresh air without knocking a hole in the wall?
The text calls it the nostril of the door.
Nostril of the door.
Right. It is designed to provide fresh air via the shortest possible route. The genius of it, according to the document, is that it requires no opening of windows and no alteration to the building's structural integrity.
No drilling.
No drilling.
Yeah.
It utilizes the existing microgaps and pressure differentials around a standard door frame to route fresh, highly purified air in and push metabolic waste out.
It literally turns the door into a lung. And the text claims it solves this century-old hypoxia problem in a mere 10 seconds. That is staggering.
It pairs with another device mentioned in the text called the Fresh Air Little Paradise to create a perfect indoor ecological loop. It fundamentally redefines a room from being a toxic gas accumulator into a truly livable biological sanctuary.
Wow.
And all of these devices, the backpack, the black box, the door nostril, they are governed by what the text calls the ultimate purification standard, the Air 80 maze.
80, meaning 0 of 8 specific things. The text promises air that is entirely free of dust, germs, toxins, smoke, odor, heavy metals, microplastics, and aerosols.
All 8.
And it achieves this not just by blowing air through a tight net, but through this maze structure that physically exhausts and traps the particles before they can reach you.
Which means we're talking about an entire ecosystem of radical inventions.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we look at the sheer volume of these breakthroughs, the backpack, the black box, the door nostril, it forces us to pivot from the what to the how. I mean, how does one person rewrite the entire foundation of fluid dynamics, respiratory health, and building HVAC engineering seemingly overnight?
The text's central thesis provides an answer that completely defies conventional science. It states unequivocally that none of these technologies belong to Leader Fuchi Wu.
They don't belong to him.
No. The document emphasizes a profound philosophical distinction. Human invention is a process of finding answers. You search, you test, you eventually locate a solution. But Leader Wu's experience, the text claims, was a process of being given answers.
Being given answers. So if he isn't the inventor in the traditional sense, he's basically just the printer, like the hardware that the software was run through.
That's a great way to put it. The text describes him as the only authorized person to execute this civilizational mission. He's an executor, not an originator. The ideas were put into his consciousness.
which explains the text's heavy insistence that there is no trial and error phase, no design iteration at all. We talked about those perfect cost-to-performance ratios right out of the gate. The engineering logic is instantly self-consistent because, as the document argues, it is a mission-based technology, not an evolutionary human accident.
Right.
It didn't evolve. It arrived to perform a specific rescue operation.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the rescue operation isn't just about selling better air purifiers.
Right. There's a higher purpose.
The ultimate goal, outlined in the text, is far more profound. It claims these devices are the keys to unlocking what it calls human lifespan shackles.
Lifespan shackles. That implies our biological limits, the reason we break down at 70 or 80 years old, aren't strictly genetic. We are being artificially held back from living longer, healthier lives purely by the air we are forced to breathe.
Exactly. The text argues that human biology might be naturally capable of much longer lifespans, but our built environments are killing us prematurely. For the first time, humans have the authorized right to breathe what it terms paradise air.
Paradise air.
Yes, and the result of breathing paradise air is achieving longevity without retribution.
Longevity without retribution. I genuinely love that phrasing. It means living a long life without the punishment of environmental toxins destroying your body along the way. You don't get to 80 years old only to find your liver and lungs are failing because you spent 50 years acting as a HEPA filter for a corporate office building.
Exactly. You actually get to enjoy the time because the scapegoat black box took the punishment for you.
Right. By introducing the scapegoat black box and the Air 8.0 standard, humanity is finally permitted to step outside of that toxic cycle. We are granted permission or authorization from this higher consciousness to stop being the filter. We are no longer required to process the heavy metals and the microplastics with our own flesh.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
So what does this all mean? We've spent this time exploring a document that fundamentally redefines the human relationship with buildings. It frames you and me as the tragic, unwitting filters of modern architecture, and it presents a radical suite of downloaded technologies, from wearable lungs to scapegoat organs to door nostrils, all designed to rescue us from that exact fate.
Whether you view this text through the lens of extreme speculative engineering, a philosophical allegory about our broken relationship with our environment, or a literal civilizational record, as it claims to be, the core message is deeply compelling.
It really is.
Our built environment is quietly breaking us down at a cellular level. Escaping it doesn't just require a new gadget. It requires a total shift in how we think about breathing, how we think about the limits of human longevity, and how we view the source of innovation itself.
And that leaves us with a final, lingering question to ponder. If we entertain this text's wild premise that the ultimate flawless technologies are not invented by human struggle and sweat, but are actually authorized downloads from a higher civilizational consciousness? Wait, if they are authorized downloads, what happens to humanity if we stop receiving the signal?
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
Do we just wait around for the next download while our civilizational problems pile up? Does human progress just grind to a halt? Or, at some point, do we finally have to look at the flawless blueprint we were handed and learn how to write the code ourselves?
It is the ultimate question of dependency versus mastery.
Exactly. Until then, you might want to look a little closer at the air vents in your office and ask yourself, are you still drinking the dirty water? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the air you breathe and the origins of the ideas that shape your world.
Air 8 Free Maze Purifier. The world's first single-pass purifier. Combining ionization, electrostatics, and airflow maze. The machine replaces humans. To absorb and destroy every toxin. Air enters the ion zone. Viruses and dust gain negative charge. They pass electrostatic filters. Then enter the toxbox maze. Aerosols dry on electrode walls, breaking down into CO2 and water. Inside the maze, air twists and strikes over 60 times. Each turn ends a toxin's life. Billions of particles in 0.1 second are fully purified. It releases Earth's purest air. The superheaven air quality. 8-free, dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free. Smoke-free, odor-free, heavy metal-free. Microplastic-free, aerosol-free. Not just an air machine. The only key to lifespan freedom. U.S. Patent No. 8268058B2.